On Saturday, the bodies of 6 U.S. Army Reserve soldiers killed last week in an Iranian drone strike in Kuwait arrived at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. Some of them had served for nearly 2 decades. The youngest was just 20 years old. Each of them leaves behind grieving families and communities. And with Donald Trump signaling that he intends to escalate this war of his own choice, it almost certainly means more such arrivals of bodies will occur. Or as Donald Trump himself put it, quote, some people will die, end quote. In fact, the way he said it, you'd think he was talking about the weather. Sometimes it will rain. Sometimes some people will die. The demographics of the U.S. military tells us that the ones who will die will almost certainly and overwhelmingly come from working and middle-class American families. This is not a war of necessity. This is a war most Americans do not understand the reasons for. But America has a long history of sending its servicemen and women into wars that the public neither fully understands nor broadly supports. But reluctance to spend blood and treasure on unclear objectives in war can be offset by something else. Infusing the conflict with a good reason, a clear purpose, a shared understanding of why the ultimate sacrifice is necessary. In this particular case, there is none of that. Not even a halfway coherent narrative to justify our war with Iran. No clear objective, no real public support. So if the American people don't understand this war and haven't rallied behind it, then what exactly is driving it? I have to step away from this scene for a moment to speculate about at least one answer to that. You see, it wasn't that long ago that groups in parts of the Middle East invoked extremist interpretations of Islam to justify violence against the West. Regimes like Saudi Arabia encouraged extreme interpretations of Islam that consider anyone who doesn't follow its doctrine, including other Muslims, to be infidels. The consequences, as we all know, have been devastating. That ideology helped give rise to movements like al-Qaeda and later its offshoot, ISIS, which not only targeted the West, but Middle Eastern regimes as well. State-sponsored clerics routinely denounced Western civilization and framed global politics as a civilizational struggle. Americans remember the consequences of this worldview because the violence it bred eventually landed on our shores. But that religious extremism did not arise in a vacuum. Crucially, it was sustained by a political bargain. For decades, the Saudi monarchy maintained an implicit agreement with its clerical class. The government will protect your authority and enforce your worldview so long as you legitimize the government. Religion, in other words, became the ideological engine for maintaining political power. And something eerily similar is now unfolding right here at home, and it's been building for some time. More than 2 centuries after the framers warned about the dangers of merging faith with political power, we're now seeing a version of that same dynamic take hold at the highest levels of the American government. It's not just creeping in, it's actively shaping how this war is being understood and justified, from those advising the president to military commanders briefing troops before their deployment. Under Pete Hegseth's leadership at the Pentagon, evangelical Christian nationalism has gained unprecedented visibility inside the U.S. military. The nation's Secretary of Defense has hosted Christian prayer services inside the Pentagon and attends weekly White House Bible studies. He's openly framed geopolitical conflict through the lens of Christian civilization. Tattooed across his chest is the Jerusalem cross. It's a symbol that was the coat of arms of the Crusader Kingdom of Jerusalem after the year 1099, and it's long associated with the idea of Christian warriors reclaiming the Holy Land. Listen to what he had to say at this last month's National Prayer Breakfast in Washington, D.C.
America was founded as a Christian nation. It remains a Christian nation in our DNA if we can keep it. And as public officials, we have a sacred duty 250 years on to glorify Him. We talk a lot about peace through strength. At the War Department, we see ourselves as the Strength Department. But we also need to remember that we derive our strength through faith and through truth and through the Word of God.
What we're now seeing play out on the global stage are the downstream effects of that kind of talk. The nonprofit Military Religious Freedom Foundation reports that it has received more than 200 complaints from service members across more than 50 military installations spanning every single branch of the U.S. military. MS Now has not independently verified or viewed these complaints, but according to the MRFF, troops say that their commanders are invoking Christian prophecy to justify the war with Iran. The organization's founder, Mikey Weinstein, told Military.com this week that the reports are continuing to come in everywhere. According to one complaint reviewed by The Guardian, a commander told officers that the war was, quote, all part of God's divine plan, end quote, and that Donald Trump has been anointed by Jesus to light the signal fire in Iran to cause Armageddon and mark his return to earth, end quote. According to MRFF, other complaints describe commanders speaking about a biblically sanctioned war that's tied to the Christian end times. Now think about that for a moment. American soldiers who come from all different faiths swear an oath to defend the Constitution, being told that war is part of some biblical prophecy, that this is literally God's plan. And the real danger, as we know, is that when war is framed as religious destiny, restraint and the laws of war tend to evaporate. Diplomacy becomes an act of sin. Violence becomes righteous. Soldiers dying becomes martyrdom. It's important to remember that the ideology driving this thinking is not fringe. It is part and parcel of the political coalition that brought Donald Trump to power. Evangelical Christianity was one of the most powerful political forces behind Donald Trump's rise. And this devil's bargain that religious nationalists struck with Trump looks not unlike the Saudi monarchy's bargain with extremism. Here in America, they would overlook Trump's moral, ethical, and legal transgressions, and in return, he would hand them the keys to the kingdom, power over American culture, power over education, power over women's autonomy, and increasingly power over the machinery of state itself. This is already happening here at home, and now we're seeing how that alliance is helping to shape American foreign policy. Mike Huckabee, Trump's ambassador to Israel and a former Baptist minister, is a self-proclaimed Christian Zionist. This is a movement that views Israel not simply as a modern state, but as the fulfillment of biblical prophecy and a necessary step toward the second coming of Christ. Huckabee himself has repeatedly framed Middle Eastern politics in explicitly theological terms. Here's where it gets interesting. In a recent interview, responding to a question about Genesis chapter 15, verse 18's description of Israel, Huckabee suggested it would be fine if Israel controlled the entire territory stretching from the Nile in Egypt to the Euphrates in Iraq, essentially much of the modern Middle East. Here's what the biblical verse states. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, saying, to your descendants, I have given this land from the river of Egypt as far as the great river, the river Euphrates. This is a sitting U.S. ambassador. But Huckabee is hardly the only figure in Trump's orbit advancing extremist religious ideas. Senator Lindsey Graham has described the current conflict as a religious war that will determine the Middle East for 1,000 years. When religious ideology, state power, and military force merge, history tells us exactly what happens. It leads to what James Madison called superstition, bigotry, and persecution. The United States military was never meant to fight for religious prophecy. Today, under Trump, Hegseth, and the Christian nationalist movement surrounding them, that line is being erased in real time. And the price of that erasure will be paid for with the lives of innocent civilians abroad. It may be paid for with the lives of innocent civilians here at home, and it will surely be paid for by American soldiers, sailors, and airmen and women, many of whom are being told that they are carrying out God's command. I want to explore the effect that that's going to have on the military with my old friend, U.S. Army Colonel Jack Jacobs. He's a military and political analyst for MS Now. Colonel, it is great to see you. You and I have spent a lot of time together over the years. We don't tend to talk about religion much.
No, not at all.
But there's a cause for this. First of all, you're an experienced military veteran. You're Jewish.
Yeah.
Not unusual in the American military to be Jewish or Muslim, or as you told me, Jain or whatever.
Yeah, the military establishment is filled with Protestants, Catholics, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, even Jains. We talked about that earlier. People who are sworn to nonviolence, and they're in the military in support roles. And I'll tell you a quick story. An old friend of mine, gone now, by the name of Desmond Doss, received the Medal of Honor for action on Okinawa during the Second World War. He was a Seventh-day Adventist, sworn to nonviolence, no guns. He received the Medal of Honor for action on Okinawa for saving the lives, unarmed, saving the lives of 75 of his fellow soldiers. What binds people together to vanquish the enemy of the Republic is not religion. As a matter of fact, it's the antithesis of focusing on religion. It's focusing on each other. We fight to defeat the enemy, but we also fight to take care of each other. And when people are ardently trying to kill you, you're not thinking about the exhortations of demagogues, people who focus their attention on our differences. We focus our attention on each other. And that's the way you surmount the assaults on your republic and on your fellow soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. I'm constantly reminded in looking at this and looking at my own experiences in combat, constantly reminded of Benjamin Franklin's observation that we either hang together or we will surely hang separately.
Right. So the concept of being a person of faith and seeking comfort from your faith, if you're in the military, is fine. That's different. Praying before. So this is a different thing. We're trying to motivate people with what are ideas that are outside of the mainstream of any faith. This is the very same extremism, and it's kind of wild because it appears in a lot of religions. It's the same extremism that we have suffered from when other people employ it.
And it's also proscribed. I mean, and for a good reason. You're not supposed to do that because it takes a unit made up of various people from various backgrounds and beliefs and faiths, and some of them with no faith at all, and divides them at a time when the only thing that's going to permit you to vanquish the enemy and take care of each other is viewing yourselves as one organization, as one unit, as one focus. And focusing on our differences does exactly the opposite, which is one reason why you're not allowed to do that. It's the antithesis of good leadership. It makes you focus on things that are not important to the unit, certainly may be important to you, but not important to and certainly not important to the defense of the Republic. We're taught from the very beginning when we're young soldiers to focus on the unit, to focus on our fellow soldiers, and to focus on defeating the enemy. To the extent that you turn it into a religious war, you almost guarantee your own defeat.